All right, so being a product of your environment is, I think, just normal. It's human nature. If you were born 50, 60, 70 years ago, you were most likely going to follow the traditional path in life, which was, going to school, getting married at a relatively young age, buying a house, starting a family. That's what people did back then. There was way more religion that was a central part of who people were, of the community. Relationships were valued. There was way less kind of just serial dating or people, not really settling down. It wasn't normal to see people who were, in their 30s who had no kids, no significant other, weren't in a house. It was a lot different back then. But that was the structure, and that was kind of the norm, the societal norm back then. And I think a big thing that changed it was just the feminism movement, right? I think back then women were very reliant on men. So there was just kind of an understanding between the sexes of, this is kind of what the man's going to do, and this is kind of what the woman's going to do. And they worked together as a team in tandem to achieve that traditional outcome, which was we're going to rely on each other. The man's going to kind of do the work and earn the money. The woman's going to, take care of the home. The woman's going to raise the young family that they had. And, it was so common back then to see families that had 5 kids, 6 kids, 7 kids. My mom came from a family of, I think it was 7 kids. And that was common back then. I don't know anyone now, that's around 30 or 35 years old that has even 5 kids. If people have kids, they usually have just a few, maybe like 1 or 2. So, it's just changed, they don't. So I was just finishing the thought, but it's just changed is what I was saying. Most people don't have as big of families anymore because it's just not the societal expectation, right? We're not really centered around having families or getting married anymore at a younger age. And it's just kind of math. If you get married and, start doing that with your partner at a younger age, especially like back before there was contraception and people on birth control and all that sort of stuff, and religion was more of a thing. Like that was my grandparents. They were just Catholic, so they didn't believe in birth control, I guess, and you just have a bunch of kids. Obviously you get married at 20 years old or whatever, and you have 7, 8, 10 kids, right? That was way more common. I mean, I didn't grow up back then, but I would imagine it was still very financially stressful having, like 7, 8, 9 mouths to feed in a household, right? Like in a 3-bed, 2-bath house. It's still going to be a lot to deal with, right? But, now it's not a societal thing anymore. Like people aren't getting, they aren't settling down with each other at a young age anymore. And so obviously there's less opportunities for a bunch of kids to happen. And then they're using more birth control or whatever, contraception, to avoid having kids. So you have just less kids. And if you don't get married and you're not like doing that until you're older, you're just going to have less kids, right? Because even when you get pregnant, like, the woman's pregnant for like 9 months, and then there's all sorts of potential complications with pregnancy. And maybe instead of having, like I've said in other videos, instead of having 4 or 5, 6, 7 kids, now it's like, well, do I even want to have 1 kid? And if I want to have 1 kid, it's like, okay, maybe I want to have 2, but that's it. And that's much more common now than it is to see families of 5, 6, 7 kids running around. But it seemed back then like that was just pretty common. Like my mom was always telling about how there were so many families that had just a bunch of kids, right? And religion definitely played a part in that, but also just settling down earlier, right? Settling down, being in a house with your partner when you're in your young 20s, and having maybe the husband or the husband most likely had a stable job that was good, that afforded, enough money to pay everything, and then, feel comfortable about starting a family. So now it's just different, right? I mean, today I think you could do it still if young people were settling down. If you had two incomes, obviously it would be easier to potentially own a house and to start having a few kids. But I think because that's not happening as much, right? And feminism is some of it, where women just want to kind of, they want to explore a little bit more. They don't want to settle down right away. They want to pursue their career. They want to get more experience. They want to travel and enjoy kind of having income and doing their own things. And so that delays the start of the family. So now you have a bunch of single people in their 20s, and instead of having two incomes, they have one income. And with inflation the way it is, it's like if you have one income and you're trying to afford a single family home, you might not be able to. So now everyone's living in apartments, and apartments, it's not like they're, cheap, right? I mean, most apartments are going to be around $2,000 a month, give or take. And that's just money that you're burning every month. It's just rent, right? You don't have any equity. You don't really have any space to start a family. And you don't even have a partner probably if you're 20, 22, 23, 24 years old. So that's kind of my look on it. But you're just like I said at the beginning, you're just a product of your environment. If you were born into a system where it was normal and society expected you and your parents were pressuring you to get married, and the women were being pushed to be caretakers and homemakers and start a family, then a lot of them would do that. And that's what happened back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. That was the expectation, and that was what people did. It's been accepted now that you don't have to do that, right? So there's no pressure, peer pressure, family pressure, really, to settle down and start a family and conform to those traditional roles. So when you have people kind of breaking from those norms, you get what we have gotten, which is just, there's less people being born, there's less family formations, all because people are they're playing out their options. They have more time to, I want to take a different job, I want to go to school for 4 or 5 years, I'm going to date different people, and I'm going to be, really selective now because I have the internet and I have all these potential suitors, right? Both men and women, I think, do that. Although, like I've said in other videos, women have, social media, dating apps where they get a really big, kind of lopsided view of what reality is, because there's just so many guys that flood into those apps and into the social media things and just praise them with attention. So a lot of the younger women they don't want to really settle down. Like they like all the attention. They want to get, they want to explore different opportunities with different guys and different relationships and things like that. So instead of getting married and settling down at a younger age, they're doing that later, or they're not doing that at all. And that's just going to result in less kids. I think that's undeniable, right? If you're not really committing to anyone and wanting to start a family at a relatively young age, then if you do decide to settle down, like when you're 30 or 35, statistically, you're just going to have less kids. There's not as much time for you to be pumping out kids if you don't start until you're 35, right? If you start it when you're 20 or when you're 22 or 23, you could see how you could have 3+ kids pretty easily over a 10-year period. If you start when you're 35, you might be lucky to get 1 kid or 2. And that's even if you want them. So you guys let me know what you think. That's just I think just the nature of the environment. Women now, I think, and they're born into this environment where there's just really no pressure to settle down like there used to be 50 years ago. So let me know what you think. Subscribe. See you in the next one.